On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, details on the Ever Forward salvage plan. I'm your host, Sal Mercaglano. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. If you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So we've been following Ever Forward and the grounding since it took place on March 13th. As you know, there was an attempt on both March 29th and March 30th to free her. If you want to go back and look at our past videos, just click right up here and you'll see the past videos we've been doing on this. This attempt coming up next is going to be substantially different. So the two previous attempts were really just tests to see how stuck she was. And the March 29th test proved she was stuck. She's embedded in mud. She drew 42 feet of water when she went out of the channel. She's now in 18 to 24 feet of mud and about a ship length and a half out of the channel. So she is stuck. And the first attempt was really a gauge. The second attempt was done on the following day on March 30th because of a change in the wind, and they were going to have 2.5 extra feet of water, but still prove the fact that she was stuck. So now we have the new plan released through several documents and plus some information relayed to me privately. So let's go ahead and take a look at the situation with Ever Forward right now. So here's Ever Forward stuck between Baltimore and the Bay Bridge at Annapolis. She hasn't moved, obviously, since March 13th. She's all the way up in the upper Chesapeake Bay. And Ever Forward, again, is a Neo-Panamax vessel. That is a vessel designed to the limits of the new lane of the Panama Canal built in 2016, meaning she's about 1,096 feet in length, over 150 feet wide, and draws usually anywhere from 45 to 46 feet of draft. She's at 41 feet right now. So she's in position. You'll see some vessels moving around, these blue ones in particularly. Ever Forward right here at the grounding spot. The spoil material that's coming from the barges and from the crane dredges that are there, the Oyster Bay and the Dale Piatt, is being sailed about 20 something miles south down here to Poplar Island, this island that's being kind of preserved. And so all the spoil material is traveling by barge. Let's go ahead and zoom in here and we'll take a look at Ever Forward's position here. There is the Bay Bridge and here is Ever Forward that we've seen. A lot more tugs around her today, and we'll talk about why that is. Dale Piatt here working off the stern. Sorry, you don't see the outline of the vessel. The vessel is pointing a little bit off southward, south-southeast around 5 o'clock. Her stern is up north-northwest around 11 o'clock. And so the Oyster Bay is working here on the bow area, and the Dale Piatt, which is the larger of the two dredges, is working off the southern end of the vessel. The information we've received came from two sources. One is from the latest bulletin posted by the U.S. Coast Guard. This is update number 3 to their Marine Safety Information Bulletin 1022. This bulletin has details that I want to kind of break down for you right now. This is page 2 of the bulletin, and it's the one that has the equipment, the staging of the equipment and all the details. So salvage operation, the staging of equipment for future pulling evolutions and container removal operations will begin on the morning of April 6th. That was yesterday. The efforts will involve the anchoring of 2 pull barges astern of Ever Forward. Now, those pull barges are represented here on this document. So here is Ever Forward. You see her bow pointing again to the south-southeast, stern to the north-northwest. There are the 2 buoys, 15, 16, that mark the northern edge of Craig Hill. And then here are the next marker buoys, 14, 16. And again, she's about a ship length and a half out. Her stern is a lot closer to the channel than her bow is. The 2 pull barges are these green lines right here. Those pull barges have 2 winches on board. One of those winches will be attached to the stern of the vessel. Each of them would be attached to different points, one to the port quarter, one to the starboard quarter, and then they'll have anchors out. And the anchors are attached to another set of winches. And as it says here, while the pull barges will remain out of the channel, the anchoring system for the westernmost pull barge, that's this one here on the left, will be in the Federal Channel, and with the other along the eastern edge of the channel. The location of the anchoring systems will be marked with buoys having a flashing white light. So where these pull barge anchors are set, they'll have flashing lights. So ships are going to have to stay to the left side, the west side of the channel as they go through. Additionally, 2 crane barges will be positioned on the port and starboard side of Ever Forward to facilitate the offload of the containers. That's these red barges right here. These are going to come in and start removing containers from Ever Forward. The stern of the westernmost crane barge will encroach on the eastern side of the channel. The diagram on the right shows the approximate locations. The allowance for one-way traffic at a reduced safe speed through the safety zone will continue throughout the container lighterage operations, which are expected to commence Friday, April 8th and conclude Friday, April 15th. While the lightering of the containers will be limited to daylight hours only, mariners should expect container barges transiting between Ever Forward and Seagirt Marine Terminal during all hours. Mariners are to use extreme caution when transiting in the vicinity of the Ever Forward and abide by the safety zone and due regard to any allowances by the captain of the port as advertised in the Notice to Mariner via VHF channel 16. So the additional tugs we've seen operating around Ever Forward would indicate the barges are coming into position, especially those anchor barges. Barges don't have AIS tracking on them typically, so we won't see them on the AIS transponder systems like marine traffic. So those anchoring barges will be in place. Now, the idea of the anchoring barges is that gives you greater pull. We talked about bollard pull when we had the attempts to pull off Ever Forward. You'll remember the 2 Atlantic tugs had about 70 metric tons of bollard pull. The Warhorse 2 had much more of that. These barges will give you a lot more bollard pull because they're anchored. And what they're doing is pulling on that anchor and they'll be pulling on the vessel at the same time. You're just not using a propeller to spin to doing it. The large salvage tugs in Europe and Asia have all that. They have winches on the forward end, they have winches on the stern, plus they use their ship's propellers. That's why they get such big bollard pulls. The cranes are the other element here. So I was able to receive some information about the cranes. So let's talk about that operation and the taking off of containers from the ship. And let me note something real quick. Since the introduction of very large and ultra large container ships with the Emma Maersk in 2006, we've seen a spate of these groundings. I mean, we've seen it. These ships have just gotten so big that groundings are actually not that uncommon. We see one almost every year, but we have never seen an operation where they have to get the containers off. The only time we've ever seen them have to crane containers off is either a true salvage where the vessel was wrecked and they were trying to get the containers off because the vessel was not recoverable, or in a container collapse situation where the containers have collapsed on board and they need to bring cranes in to do it. But usually they do all that pier side. This situation is extremely different. And let's talk about why. So I was able to get information about what barges they're going to be using and the issue. So these are 2 Don John Smith barges that they have already. The first one here is the Columbia, New York. She's going to come in and be used for this. Now, they've had to modify the cranes on here, and this is why they haven't started using them yet, or why they're getting into position. The notice said starting on April 8th. My word was on April 9th, but we can expect it to start within the next day or so. They got to modify these cranes because these cranes have to reach over the top of the stack of the vessels, and I'll show you that in a second why that's an issue. So Columbia, New York is one of them. The other one that they're going to be using is another Don John barge, and it's this one, Farrell 256. The cranes that are on them right now do not reach to the top of the stacks, which means they have to modify them. And that's become the fairly significant issue in this process. So they're going to move these cranes into position off the vessel. And they're going to work on both sides, port and starboard. The reason they need 2 is, number one, this is going to be a very slow operation. They are not going to be able to move containers off this ship at a rate akin to what they do in a port. Understand, when you move containers off a vessel in port, the vessel is stationary. It's moored alongside the berth. Plus, it has a stability system that is always compensating for the vessel to ensure it's on an even trim. The ship-to-shore crane is stabilized. So that you can move that crane very quickly. And, you can usually move 30 to 40 containers an hour on a vessel. Pretty fast movement. But, the hookups are automatic. That's not going to exist here because this ship is not at the berth. It's, again, out at anchor. It's out at anchor. It's out at aground. And the barges themselves are going to be moving. They're not going to be stabilized. So those cranes are going to be pendulating. And let me be clear, I'm not a crane operator. I've never operated a ship-to-shore crane. However, I've been on top of a mast of a sailing vessel that's 150 feet in the air. And I got to tell you, even in a light breeze, you're whipping around pretty good up there, let alone when some swells start. And that's going to translate to the load you're picking off this ship. And it's estimated they're only going to work during daylight hours. They have about a week of operations here to do all they need to do. So they are not going to take 5,000 boxes, which is what the estimated number is. This is a 12,000 TEU vessel, but she carries obviously a mix of 20-foot and 40-foot units. 40-foot units or take up 2 TEU spaces. And so they're going to be carrying a mix of these containers on board. She probably has 5,000 loaded containers, and there's probably a slew of empties, but you want to get the loaded off. Loaded containers can weigh anywhere from 5 to 30 tons. And it's estimated their plan is to take off about 550 containers. And so the 550 containers they're estimating is going to weigh in at about 7,500 tons, which means that you're averaging a load there of about 15 tons per container. That in conjunction with removing some ballast. Now, they say ballast. I haven't heard anything about fuel coming off, but they're talking about removing some ballast. So what they hope to do is get 550 containers off. This ship will have a trim stability book. It's not actually a book. It's a computer system, but it'll tell you how much it takes to raise this vessel a foot or two. So obviously with 10,000 tons of gear coming off, they're going to be able to raise this vessel a substantial number. I don't know the exact level that they're going to do, but what we do know is as they're taking those containers off, the dredging is going to continue. And what we've heard is they want to continue dredging down to 42 feet so that they can get the stern up off the bottom, pivot her counterclockwise, and swing the vessel out into the channel. Bring back up the image that we had from the Marine Bulletin. So again, you're going to see those barges working on the stern of the vessel, taking off containers. And again, we're not talking about a huge amount of containers. You're talking about 550 containers, over a week. You're talking 80 containers a day, roughly, getting them off. And the key here is once they get that weight off the stern, again, they're dredging around the bow, the oyster bays around the bow, down the starboard side of the vessel, closest to the channel and around the stern. What they want to do then is be able to start pulling her back toward the deep water. And if they can get her pulled back enough into this deep water, swing the stern out here into the channel, they can kick the engine over and then use the pull of the barges, tugs that they'll bring in. That's the key, is getting that engine free so that they can use that additional pull. That's what they did with Ever Given in the Suez. The plan is hopefully by mid-April, around the 17th, 18th, or 19th, when the highest tide will be available, and probably waiting for a good day with wind from the south to blow more water up, they'll be able to refloat the vessel. The rest of the plan, once they do it, so as they get the containers off, those containers will be placed on barges and taken back up to Seagirt, terminal up in Baltimore. Once the vessel is freed, they will take the vessel to Baltimore. This is what the word I'm getting is, and it wasn't included in the Coast Guard report. They'll take her up to Baltimore, survey the vessel, assume the vessel is in good shape, because damage to this vessel is the big variable we just don't know about yet. This is the damage done to the bow of Ever Given that went ashore in the Suez. This is looking up from below the vessel in the dry dock in Qingdao. To put some scale to this image, these little yellow things you see right here are people. And what you're looking is the bulbous bow of the vessel was pushed up into the ship. This is her coming in. Notice it's not that the bow crushed in when she hit the side of the Suez. This is from sitting on its bow. This vessel was hung by the bow and stern, so a lot of weight was pushed on the bow of the vessel, and the bow collapsed into the ship. This image right here shows you the bulbous bow, which normally is all the way down here, collapsed in. This is the bow thruster room right here. These are the twin bow thrusters on the bow. All of it crushed in to it, and they actually had to cut the whole below the water bow off the vessel and replace it in Qingdao. The amount of damage to Ever Forward is not known at this time, but that's going to be a big concern. What they're going to do is, again, is take that vessel to Baltimore, assess it, survey it. If she meets her classification society's good enough to sail, They'll take the containers that they offloaded, put them back on board, sail her to Norfolk, allow her to offload in Norfolk, maybe let her sail to New York too. Not sure, but probably so. If she's good enough position to sail, she'll go to New York and then return back home, probably light or with some empty containers on board. And I envision that she would go into a shipyard in Asia. Her bottom is going to look like a crumpled soda can from sitting on mud. Even though it's mud, it's just mud, but it's a lot of weight on that mud, and that bottom is not designed to take this. So we're looking for container operations to take place, daylight hours, weather contingent. Again, you can't have any wind or swell for those cranes to get those containers off. You really don't want 5 to 30 ton containers pendulating off the edge of a crane. So they'll get about 550 of those containers off in about a week. Lighten her up, keep dredging, and again, try mid-April to float her off. So that's the latest I have on this. I will keep you posted as more information comes out. Once again, if you're new to the channel and haven't done so, hit subscribe, hit the bell so be alerted about new videos when they come out. Give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. I don't get everything right, people, and you will let me know when I get things wrong. Please do. If you liked what you saw, leave a great comment. I appreciate that. And if you can, join our Patreon page. Patreon helps us keep this channel afloat, so to speak, and allow me to bring these updates to you. So until our next video or our next ship grounding, evergreen, stay straight, stay between the buoys. This is Sal signing off.